Oh, there we go.
Ooh.
Ooh, are we on yet?
Are we live?
Well,
Wait,
good afternoon,
wait.
everyone.
We're still, I think, waiting for it to come up. Are we
No,
live?
I'm pretty sure we're live.
I'm pretty sure we're on.
You reckon? Okay, go.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. We're back, 9 out of 10 testers, with the same professionalism you've come to expect from us as a group.
I absolutely jumped the gun on saying we're doing the technical issues early today.
We're only 2 minutes late. That's almost a record.
Yeah, as far as like just getting started and iteratively just getting better, I think we're doing like we're still going upwards on that curve. So, progress for the win. So, welcome everyone. Just a quick introduction from us. We have one member not with us today. Chris, we love you. We'll have you join us next time. In the meantime, please just quickly introduce yourselves, starting with Veerle.
Hi, I'm _𝑤𝑒𝑟𝑒 Verhagen. I'm a software tester for Dutch Railways, and I just realized by the shape that I put my hands in to create a heart that I am fully millennial.
Nice one. Hannah.
Yeah, my name is Hanna Strander, and I'm a test consultant at Visioneye in Sweden.
And Shay.
Hey, I'm Shay, and I'm a senior QE manager at ℜ𝐻𝐸𝐴𝑡𝑠.
And I'm Sanne Visser. I'm your host today, and I am working for ℎ𝑒𝑎𝑟, currently on assignment for KLM. So we're here today to talk about a beautifully coined term, which I think we can credit Shay for, unless you read it somewhere, which was, are we cross-functional humans?
Yeah.
Was that your phrase, or did you borrow that?
I don't recall it seeing somewhere, but in the interests of the internet where everything has probably been said and done before, I probably am just cribbing off somebody.
Right. So the idea is how many things can we be specialists in? Or should we instead focus on being generalists? What do teams actually need? What should we be thinking about when we talk about cross-disciplinary skills? How do we feel about things? I want to start us off with a quote today, which is a little bit different than how we usually do things. But that's the one that was in the description. And it kind of says, it's from Marianne Bellotti from a book we read in book club recently. And it says, each group is capable of learning the language of another. But how many disciplines should a single person be expected to master to do her job? Is it any wonder that most of us restrict our scope to the massive technical complexity that is directly relevant to our jobs? Any reactions to that quote?
Yeah, it's a big one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Uncharacteristically silent, all of us.
Normally it's like, yeah, jump in. Um,
Because to be fair, I think we have an incredible, technically complex job already.
yeah.
Like we
Yeah.
we already have a lot to adapt to. We have different tech stacks, we have different tools, we have different disciplinaries already stacked into what testing is. Like, should the scope be beyond that? And are we physically capable of doing it?
It's interesting because I feel like even within the technical complexity, there are still niches.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like saying that that is already a niche, I'm like, actually, that's still very broad. And that would actually be, let's say, my counter question. How do we define specialist and generalist? So, for instance, if you say that you're, as a tester, a specialist in test automation, I guess some people might still find that too broad because what do you automate? What frameworks do you know? So then some other person might say, "Oh, I'm a playwright specialist," but that's already like zooming in on a single framework. So I guess one person's specialist might be another person's generalist. Where do you draw the
Ooh.
line?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think where I would draw lines is where maybe functionally you also see different role descriptions with other deliverables. I think that's where I think lines would cross. Like as a test automation specialist, like your deliverables will still be fairly similar to like Playwright versus Cypress versus like I think there's still that commonality in role description and deliverables. So that's where I would draw a line, I guess.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and we're sort of jumping into skills where straight away where it's things that you can perhaps quantify from one point of view. Somebody says, I'm an automation specialist. You can go, prove it. Go and automate shit. Great. What about leadership though? I the thing I've said before, I've been in a leadership position for over 24 years. In fact, 25 years this year. Does that make me a specialist leader? I'm not sure.
Mostly just makes you old, but yeah.
Makes me old. But it's that kind of thing. Is my specialism leadership? I don't know, because I don't think I'm always averse to call myself an expert. I'm always averse to call myself, I don't know, a thought leader or something, something like that. But the truth is, the majority of my job has always been in leadership.
It also reminds me of another oft quoted kind of joke, which is like, do you have 25 years of experience, or do you have the 1 year of experience that you repeated 25 times?
I'm probably closer to 1 month of experience that I've repeated 25 times.
But I think there is a point to that. Like, there are also just some areas where maybe I've just learned a few tricks that I just convincingly constantly repeat, and in no way do I feel like I own the discipline or know the things that are there. Like, that is a different thing. I probably am cross-functional at that moment, but it's not because I understand exactly what I'm doing, but I kind of have figured out a few ways to get through doing stuff like that. That is maybe an analogy for that.
So
Yeah.
how about being very practical, right? We're all always looking to improve our situations. It can be a tough market out there. So when you're talking about employability, right? What do you think? What is a good thing? Do you want to be a specialist, or do you want to show that you can be good at many different things? Because I always wonder, so there's a few people, I'm not going to name any by name, but there's a few that sort of positioned themselves, I think, a while ago as accessibility testing specialists or experts. And I always wonder, do you now only get hired to do that? Or do you still get like diverse gigs, but you try and like put a focus on accessibility in those gigs? How does that work, you think?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, I think, because I mean, how specialized you want to be kind of depends on like what size of companies are like available for you. Because if it's a small team, you can't be too specialized, because then that won't be 100. Well, you could if it's not 100% gig, but if you're in a team of 5 people and you only do accessibility testing, that might not bring as much value as the team would need, sort of.
And to add another complexity to your already complex question, because that's just fun, is it what you're selling, or is it also what you're adding value with once you are there? Because there's a difference between what you sell as a profile and what you end up delivering as value. I do think almost always.
Then if I can add another dimension just to make things more more
Keep on
entertaining.
piling on.
Yeah. Do you see what Emily is saying in the chat? She's asking about specialism and expertise.
Ooh.
Oh, yeah.
Ooh.
Yes. Like the
Maybe we should
expertise would be a certain mastery, and a specialism would be working within a specific area, is the way I would think about it if I had to define that. And then I think you would typically want to add value based on your specialism and be hired based on your expertise. That doesn't feel true now that I've said it out loud.
Yeah. Better in my head.
But it's really tricky, and I'm realizing now that we've already sort of started the conversation about it. Actually, what do we mean by specialism? What do we mean by expertise? And it's like this little semantics thing, but it is quite important, I guess.
Yeah, and another thought keeps popping up in my head. Aren't we just having the same discussion again that we had when sort of T-shaped testers were introduced?
Yeah.
When that was a thing, remember, like 4 or
Yeah.
5 years ago, when we
I
all had to become
do.
T-shaped and pie-shaped? Isn't this the same discussion? Like it
M-shaped.
repeated, M-shaped,
Yeah, W-shaped, M-shaped, C-shaped, whatever.
cone-shaped.
Yeah, yeah. I think there is a little bit of full circle on that, but I think also a lot of people, you know, when I'm hiring somebody, you know, I've got an area to fill. I've got, you know, somebody who I need to be able to do this and probably mostly that, you know, kind of thing. So that's kind of what I'm looking for, is that sort of like, I want somebody who has more experience in one area and maybe a little bit less experience in others. But does that mean you know, I'm hiring T-shaped or W-shaped or whatever? But I don't know. I don't necessarily put a letter of whichever of your chosen alphabet to it, but I guess I am kind of looking for somebody who has taken the time to learn a bit more about one area than others, and there's more useful to me in that area of the job description. So.
And I think I would add that there's a level in which, when it comes to figuring out certain bits and pieces, when we have a typical type of issue, like if we are looking at our test architecture, then there is a level of trust that I would have with a specialist versus a generalist. Both are valuable, and I think you need them in the discussion, but like if it comes to like how should we do this to maybe avoid future issues, the specialist would be higher on my list than maybe the test automation generalist. Whereas when it comes to maybe quickly solving a problem that needs a lot of different skill sets and there's just problems all across the board, the generalist might get stuff moving quicker. So maybe there is also that, like, what do you trust them to be doing is an aspect of the question.
So if I can then take it back to, let's say, not hiring testers, but being a tester, I guess it'll come down to, what do you prefer doing? Like, what do you want your job to be like?
Yeah.
And in a way, I always think like, oh, I should specialize in something. But at the same time, I feel like I might get really bored. Like, it's also kind of fun to be on different kind of duties all the time, right?
Yeah.
At least I think it is.
I agree. I get too bored if I get like just narrowed into one specific thing.
Yeah.
It's a lot more fun to get to explore different areas. And I feel if you just do your expertise, you might grow in that. But when you do a lot of different things, you can grow in so many different ways that you might have use of later on as well.
There's a very famous book called The First 90 Days, which is about how to onboard when you're a new leader in a company. So it's very much about setting up the learning in the beginning. And one of the things he warns about, which I hear you both saying, is that we have problem preferences. So we have types of problems that we like to solve and have skills that match them. But what I'm hearing you and Hannah and 𝑤𝑒𝑟 say is like, but I like working on new problems that require a different skill set. So I don't necessarily have a very strong problem preference that comes out continuously in my work. I prefer new problems with new skills because that is what keeps me engaged. Would that kind of sum it up?
Yeah, a bit, I think. I mean, it keeps you from not getting too bored, because when you're stuck in it's always the same problem and always the same area, it just gets a bit dull, sort of.
Yeah, because in the book they use it as kind of a warning, like beware when you've transitioned into a completely new role, like for instance, from individual contributor to leader, that you might still be carrying across your problem preference that now doesn't work.
I think I recognize the problem preference thing, and I think it's part of why I actually enjoy taking on like different roles. And I see Sebastian say something similar in the chat. He says, as a tester, I specialized in understanding people, apart from other things. And I think maybe people are my problem
preference.
This
is why you hang out with us, right?
Explains a lot.
No, right. But I feel like if there are issues with maybe group dynamic, or if you're trying to establish trust within the team, or if you're trying to sort of bring people together, I do feel like that is one of those things that I jump into. And I always feel like it's a bit of a cliche because I'm not originally, I don't have a background in IT originally, so I come from like the humanities. I'm also a woman, which I think like a lot of sort of social people problems are often dumped on us, like, oh, you're a woman, you must be so great with people. And so I feel like a big cliche, but at the same time, I'm like, I do honestly enjoy that aspect of the work. And I do enjoy trying to sort of empathize with others, be it on the team because you've got maybe like a problem with the group dynamic, or because you're looking at your software from like the different angles of different users, or you have to sort of like, I don't know, build a bridge towards another team that maybe needs something from you, and you can't work it out together. So I always do feel like it's not strictly part of being a tester, but for some reason those things do end up with me, and I like that. And
I think
I feel
yeah.
like it's not like, it doesn't really feel like a transferable skill. It's something that's really difficult to sell, I feel, if you're going to apply for jobs or to put it on your CV. And at the same time, I feel like it is valuable, and it is a part of working, not of my job, but of having jobs, that I'm like, I kind of like that thing.
It's also a way of looking at your personal development. So while it might not be useful for like job hunting or role definitions, I think it is an interesting way to look at possible skill gaps. Because if you know you have this people preference and you like working on the type of communication, teamness, togetherness problems, likely you're going to have gaps on the other like type of problems, right?
Yeah, props. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's actually quite cool.
I think that could be quite an actionable thing to do, to take a look at like the stuff I typically like jump on within my team, even if it's not role specific. Is it problem specific? So is it always the same type of problem that I like to work on? Is that actually what I'm turning out to be specializing in, and having this strength build up that is going on in my career, that it's not necessarily a specific skill, but it is a specific problem solving preference that just keeps getting stronger and stronger. I wonder if that might be a way to look at it. All right.
It could be.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm wildly distracted by the chat because Emily says, can we pause on that? A lot of testers are perhaps people from underrepresented groups in other
Ooh.
areas of IT, in my opinion. And I think that's quite, if I'm understanding her comment correctly, I think that's about like having an IT background or not originally. Which of us does? Does any of us?
Well,
No,
I'm not.
I don't think we have IT backgrounds.
No. I'm a university dropout, university failure in biology. There we go. So that's how I qualify for being in IT.
I call it.
I mean,
Let's try something.
yeah, I do have a degree in well, informatics, but I've only ever worked as a tester.
I don't think
So.
I even knew that, Hannah. That's so cool.
We learn things every day.
Yeah, but to be fair, my degree was really broad, like, which might be why I like doing general things, because I was like, oh yeah, this is cool. You don't specialize in anything. You can choose yourself what you want to study. So,
But I think that kind of sums up testing, doesn't it? I mean, you think about over the years, it's like how complex are some of the organizations we've had to work within. I mean, for me in my current place of work, I just sometimes it just stuns me how many different moving parts there are. It's not a website and a couple of airplanes and an app kind of thing. There's a hang of a lot of other stuff going on in the background, and you're like, okay, so a generalist or somebody who is maybe a cross-functional person, a problem solver, a toolsmith, those kind of things, I think is, that's where coming into an enterprise environment, maybe that's where people such as myself, who is that kind of definitely master of none, definitely trying to be jack of all trades, can shine. Whereas maybe a small startup where you have where the stack is fairly specific, that's where specialists thrive. It could be sort of horses for courses in that respect.
Actually, you've touched on something that I wanted to transition us to anyway, because what you mentioned kind of comes back to what I would call feedback loops. Because it also requires, if you are this type of generalist or like multi-level problem solver, you'll have lots of feedback loops open. And I think that is another area where there is a risk for cross-functional humans, because each one of an open feedback loop needs listening to. You need to keep it open. You need to process what comes from it. You have that information, you have those moving parts, and they do need to be processed. So I think sometimes I get annoyed when people will close a feedback loop on me. We're like, why are you no longer listening to me from this program, project level, moving parts thing? Because you should be having that loop open. But I can also understand, like, yeah, but I get that you also just need to do your job. And I get annoyed.
I'm really intrigued by the concept of a feedback loop, actually.
Yeah. You want me to explain that a little bit?
If you could, yeah.
Yeah, sure. So like a feedback loop would be if you take it into like a DevOpsy context, where the team members will have to, pick up signals from incidents. They have to keep the work that is in their sprint. They have to be on point from their own perspective, either engineering or architecture or requirements perspective. They have to be on top of that aspect. And each one of these loops is open. And you can layer on top of that, managing up to your boss, knowing that you're dependent on another team, monitoring those sessions, being aware of what your company goals are. They put out a mission statement beginning of the year, again, another feedback loop. Those are all things that you monitor, or you can close down. You can decide not to receive the information or process it. And I think there is a lot of risk that there become too many, and it starts to look like you don't care. But what you're actually trying to do is just get stuff done, right?
But so like in that sense, I guess anything could be a feedback loop, because it's all about, I guess, your actions and the consequences of that, and basically you being aware of the consequences or receiving information about the consequences. That's the feedback loop.
Yeah, and it's also just very actively picking and choosing what you're deciding to listen to, because a listening requires action. So
Right.
like you'll see a lot of people, this one is very common, tune out into company briefings. Like they are just like, whatever the company's doing, that's fine. But we need to get this feature out and it needs to be done by next month, right? So like the fact that my company has decided to do this thing on policy level, I honestly like could not give two shakes, right? And they'll tune it out. And there's the opposite where like you actively tune it in because maybe you're looking for a promotion or you're wanting to talk at that level and add strategy or add products to it. So you open the loop. And I think you see that a lot. And when people close it, to me, it feels like they don't care. But what they're usually actually doing is like preserving sanity, I think.
Right. Yeah, because that's the reason that I said like anything at that point can be a feedback loop. Like any action that you take in the world will have a consequence, and you being aware of that consequence then makes that feedback loop, right? So like, wow, that's an overwhelming amount of information.
But that's the point. Like if you then restrict that scoping to your job, that will make you more specialist almost by default.
When you say your job, you mean the tasks that are on your job description, right? So not your work environment, but like your actual tasks.
Your actual tasks. Because if you mute them, per definition, you're doing the other things because you are listening to those and you are acting on them. And I think there's something to be said to the metaphor, like of how many tabs do you have open at a single time? And you have that wonderful joke, it's like too many and I don't know which one the music's coming from. I think that's us a lot of the time where we're trying to be generalists and keep an eye on everything.
All day, every day. My gosh.
Yeah. I mean, people are horrified at mine. I group them so I can close them down so it doesn't look as much. But I mean, hidden behind it is a lot.
You have a tab of tabs, basically. There we go.
Yes, I do. I've categorized them so that I can just close it down and then like oh, see my display. It's not too many tabs. It's just like 50 hiding somewhere.
I think it's interesting, like how much life has changed over the years, and how many of these feedback loops are always about, are always on at every single moment. And that, it is almost like an orchestra playing, a symphony or something. It's at one stage you hear this little thing over there, and then there's a little peep from somewhere else. And you're like, shit, do I need to worry about that? And then there's something over there that's coming at you. And I don't know, over the years those number of feedback loops to continue with it is more and more and more and more. And I don't know how there's a way to, I don't know, turn them off, pick and choose, maybe. As you said, if you turn one off, that means you're stopping listening to it for either for that moment or permanently. But then there's the paranoia of what am I missing out on?
Well, the thing that concerns me is not so much that aspect of it, but it's like when people do mute them, the perception is, at least it is on my side, that you don't care. And that's the part that concerns me. Like, if you've decided not to jump at every incident because you've decided to concentrate on your test automation framework, so you've muted that loop. I don't think people do that because they don't care, but the perception is, obviously you don't want this, and you've actively chosen to ignore it.
Isn't that a question of prioritization? Because honestly, you can't do all the things. You can't pick up all the user stories. You can't build all the features, and you can't listen to all the feedback. You have to prioritize, right? And so I guess in the same way, we've got this thing at Dutch Railways where I work a lot, that there's like always tons of people who want, because we're only one software team, and there's always like a ton of people that need something. And one of the things that our PO gets a lot of hassle about is, he says, we collectively prioritize all of the initiatives because we just can't build all the things. And then sometimes people get annoyed and they tell him, no, because like if we have to go through like the process of prioritization, like it's not going to get built. And he's like, that's exactly what prioritization is for. And in a way, that means that I guess we don't care because we care about the other thing more.
So then there's correspondingly, if that's the thought, then having either generalist or specialist actually comes from having or not having enough prioritization. And then once again, being or not being a specialist is context dependent, depending on how well your organization prioritizes. And we're back to, it's about the context, baby.
Well, this is it. I was about to say context. So it's one of the things I've been thinking about a lot recently, particularly in my interactions with people, is like the one to many and many to one relationships and context, in the sense that, you're one person and everybody's going, well, why haven't they answered my email? Well, because I'm getting from there. So I have a many to one relationship there. But at the same time, I have to be aware that if I'm sending one email out to that person, that might be one of 100. So I have to sort of understand that and keep that context. But also, it's really hard telling people, guys, the reason you're not being answered right now is you're kind of in a list, and your one goes down the list because there's a few higher priority things that come in, and I have to prioritize, otherwise I'm going to fall over.
I really want to mention an experiment that 𝐜𝐫𝐶𝐬𝐬-𝐸 blogged about at one point that may be a part of a solution to this. It's from these concepts called working in the open, from like the agile context. I'll look up which exact person and wrote the book. But they suggested like having a place publicly where you kind of have like a weekly newsletter that'll just tell people what you did that week, can solve like a big part of this, where it's like, if you're interested in what we've been doing, here's our weekly blog, like here's our team stuff. And it's very informal, it's very friendly. And he did an experiment on it, and he wrote about it on his smallsheds.com website, about that entire writing experiment. Like in the end, I think it stopped being read and that was the end of the experiment. But like for a full year, he did like a weekly, here's what I worked on kind of thing. And that worked really well. So maybe there's a little nugget in there for you. All right, I want to move us to the last little segment, and I think that was a very interesting question that Hannah actually put in our prep notes, which is, what is the best for the future? Like, are you actively becoming more of an expert in one or more areas, or are you actually generalizing? And where do you think the future is for most testers? Both questions on individual and meta level, please.
Oof.
I mean, yeah, it was just a question that came to me when I was reading through our notes, prepping for it. I mean, I'm definitely more of a generalist, I'd say. And I think for smaller teams, that can normally be maybe better to fill a void, sort of, because you can help out with a lot of things. So it's not like they can, oh, we just need a test of 50%, but I can actually contribute with other things. But yeah, I've never really specialized too much in anything I was going to say, but testing.
It's so
And would you
funny
recommend
because
it for most testers?
I mean, it depends on how you are like a person. If I just did the same thing every single day, like just did manual tests, didn't like read logs or dig into anything, I'd be bored out of my mind.
So you wouldn't recommend that?
I mean, it depends on what keeps you sane.
All right, so do what keeps you sane.
I think so.
that might honestly be the best option for just in life.
Yeah.
Exactly, just do what keeps you sane. Good
Good
advice.
summary of it.
How about you, Firla? Because you've done some very different roles recently, and you're now actually moving into some niches, I would say. Like as we've had,
moving into niches? Yeah, I
think
suppose
you have been. Yeah, like some
It's-
bubbles of stuff.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's really interesting that we're talking about this now because in my experience, in like the things that I've been focusing on recently, I felt like, oh, I'm like starting to get a bit better at this thing. I'm starting to like look into this more. And so I felt like, oh, maybe I'm choosing to specialize a little bit more. Now that we've been talking about it, now that I'm actually reflecting on it, I actually don't think I'm specializing in a thing. I think I'm learning more new things, which means I'm generalizing more. But my experience, let's say my perception of what I've been doing has been the opposite. Because I
Right.
feel like I'm learning these specific things. That
Is it
means I'm
maybe because of that expertise versus specialist thing? Like your expertise is growing while you're maybe not
yeah.
specializing?
No, yeah, I think absolutely. But also because for me these things are new. So it instantly like it's so basically we've got all of our monitoring and it's like this whole great thing, and I've been diving into that a lot more, and I've been like going through different bits and bobs, and to me it feels like, oh, I'm now at the moment specializing in this thing. But then actually talking about it, I'm like, no, actually this is a new thing that I'm picking up, and I'm still not going to be an expert at it. I'm just going to understand how it works. So actually I'm adding a new item.
You're generalizing.
Your generalist portfolio.
Yeah, so
God,
like,
yeah.
would your advice be like, dear testers, be aware you might feel like you're specializing, but you're actually becoming a generalist as you're learning?
Yeah, you're actually just, yeah, I would say like definitely be aware of that difference between adding new elements that you now also know about, or diving deeper into something that you're already quite good at, I guess. Yeah. And be aware that your experience might not actually like accurately reflect reality.
Yeah, good point, to be fair. Shay, I'd love your perspective a bit more on like the leadership or strategy side of things, because one of the things that I'm noticing in my current role is I'm actually not expected to be doing the doing anymore, but to be doing the thinking. And I think there's an interesting generalist specialist about it, like doing the thinking as a specialist, but then delegating the doing of it. And I think you're in a similar position.
Absolutely, and I think, and that's I think one of the biggest learnings, and it's almost that would almost be one of the sort of specialisms of leadership, is learning how to delegate well, or how to delegate in such a way that you keep things moving forwards. Yeah, it is one of those things of like there are so leadership is there's no sort of like there are some qualifications, but it's not like, I become Prince 2 project manager or a safe project manager or a bloody blah. For me, it is leadership is such an interesting subject because you can be a leader in a technical area or just a leader of people or a leader of a team. And to be able to be comfortable, I think, being comfortable with that kind of uncertainty, but also knowing like, okay, I need to push this to somebody. How do I do that in an effective way? And then seek them out to get that feedback and sort of go, right, I'm going to throw this away to you, but I kind of need it back after a bit once you've done that work I've asked you to. And that's I think one of the biggest skills is that that you need to follow up on stuff, and that's hard. It really
Yeah.
is.
And I think there's a speciality or an expertise to doing that, to having the plan and knowing that the buck stops with you. That is unique to those types of positions when you're no longer at the keyboard implementing it. And it becomes more about, no, I'm setting us in this direction. And honestly, a lot of the time, that's a big guess based
Yeah.
on experience. But the buck stops with you. And there is an expertise to that as well, where you're like, I'm doing my best with all the data and all the feedback that I did get. And I'm now deciding that this is the direction we go. Everybody fall in line and let's get you going.
Yeah.
And then to realize that maybe that's wrong. And to have that, again, feedback into future decisions. And there's a big part of that is very much, I think, a specialist type of role. But it no longer has anything very specifically to do with testing, other than that is the thing I'm being asked to strategize about.
Yeah.
The rest of the job has now become very, very different.
I agree. And becoming one of the things when you become a leader and at a certain level, where you do stop doing the thing that got you to that position. So yeah, I do a lot less actual testing now than I have in any time in my career. And there was a time when I almost did no testing, but it was about leading the testing, and that was pure play leadership. And that's, you have to sort of go, okay, I understand that my skills from the past allow me to ask the searching questions to gain that context, but then I have to lead through that from that information. I then have to lead to get success in whatever this project is, whatever this app is, whatever this journey is.
Yeah.
That's that's the interesting part. That's the part that keeps me going.
All right, you lovely cross-functional humans. That brings us to the end of today. I'm going to change our ending just a little bit, but if you have like a last note, go ahead and jump in here.
I do have a last note because I feel like this session hasn't been ranty at all, and the people in the chat are going to feel very scammed. So I'll tell you one thing that I really hate. I just really hate the expression wearing many different hats.
Yeah.
Just where they go like, oh, how many oh, I wear a lot of different hats at work, and I'm like, shut up.
Yeah.
So there you go. That was the one rant for today.
I just want to wear one big ass sombrero with a lot of little
dangly bits. Yeah, exactly. Let's do that. Let's all wear sombreros and let's stay cool. All right, folks, we'll be back in about a month. Look out for us on all the socials. We're 9 out of 10 testers on LinkedIn and on Blue Sky these days. So you can follow us there. All these lovely individual people you can find on LinkedIn, and otherwise you can find, I think most of us follow us on our 9 out of 10 testers page. So we'll be back in about a month. And hopefully with less tech issues than ever before, as we have this learning curve.
Working on it.
We'll see you then.
All right.
Thank you all so much.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Right, now I have to find the off button of this thing.
Yeah, you have to find it.
Are we off yet?
Hang on.
Maybe a sombrero will help.
Like yeah, maybe.
A technical hat.